You think people lose interest because you said the wrong thing, because you replied too slowly, because you seemed too emotional, because you cared too much. But most of the time, that is not what changes the way people treat you. What changes everything is predictability. The moment people fully understand your emotional pattern, they stop paying attention with the same intensity. Not because you became less valuable, because certainty changes perception. And most people never realize how much of attraction, respect, attention, and emotional tension is connected to uncertainty. At first, people are alert around you. They analyze your reactions. They notice your tone. They wonder how you feel. Every interaction feels emotionally alive because there is still movement, still mystery. But over time, many people slowly train others to stop valuing their presence, not intentionally, just through repetition. They always respond instantly, always explain themselves, always chase clarity, always reveal exactly how they feel before the other person even asks. And eventually, the emotional tension disappears, because there is nothing left to discover. The pattern becomes obvious, and once someone believes they completely understand your reactions, your emotional impact weakens. That is why some people suddenly feel ignored after becoming more available, or feel overlooked after trying harder, or feel invisible after giving more energy. Because effort without emotional balance often removes tension instead of creating connection. And this happens everywhere: relationships, friendships, families, workplaces. You can actually watch the shift happen. At first, people lean toward you. Then gradually, they stop wondering, stop anticipating, stop paying close attention. Because your reactions become automatic, completely readable, emotionally guaranteed. And humans naturally pay more attention to what feels emotionally uncertain than what feels permanently available. That does not mean you should manipulate people. It means you should stop abandoning your emotional center just to maintain attention. Because the strange truth is this: the more desperately you try to hold someone's focus, the less focused they often become. People feel energy, especially emotional pressure. They feel when every interaction secretly carries the fear of losing them. And once that fear starts shaping your behavior, your presence changes. You stop expressing yourself naturally. You start managing impressions, controlling reactions, monitoring silence, overanalyzing delays, trying to prevent emotional distance before it even happens. And ironically, that is usually when emotional distance begins. Because anxious energy slowly removes authenticity. People can sense when your actions are no longer coming from self-respect. They start coming from emotional survival. That is why calm detachment changes dynamics so powerfully. Not fake detachment, not games. Real emotional stability. The kind where you stop trying to force outcomes. The kind where silence no longer terrifies you. The kind where you stop chasing reassurance every time energy changes slightly. Because most people panic the moment they feel uncertainty. And panic creates predictable behavior. They double text, overexplain, seek validation, push harder, reveal insecurity immediately. But emotionally grounded people do something different. They observe first, they pause, they let the moment breathe, and that pause changes everything. Because people are deeply affected by emotional contrast. When someone expects immediate reaction and receives calm instead, they notice when someone expects emotional chasing and receives composure instead. They notice when someone expects access to your attention at all times and realizes your state no longer revolves around them. They notice. Not always consciously, but emotionally. And emotional reactions shape behavior more than logical explanations ever will. That is why people often become more interested after you emotionally rebalance yourself. Not because you became colder, because your energy stopped feeling dependent. There is a huge difference. Dependency creates pressure. Self-possession creates gravity. One chases, the other attracts. And many people spend years accidentally teaching others to undervalue them because they constantly interrupt emotional tension with reassurance. Every silence gets filled. Every misunderstanding gets overexplained. Every shift in behavior gets confronted immediately. Every uncomfortable feeling gets exposed too quickly. And while honesty matters, emotional timing matters too, because constant emotional exposure can slowly remove depth from interactions. People stop feeling your presence. They start consuming your availability. That is why emotional restraint can feel so powerful. Not silence as punishment, silence as self-control. The ability to experience emotion without instantly reacting to it. That skill alone changes social dynamics dramatically. Because reactive people are easy to predict, and predictable emotional patterns eventually lose intensity. Think about how differently people respond when someone remains calm during tension. The entire emotional atmosphere changes. People become more aware, more attentive, more curious, because composure creates psychological space, and space increases perception. Most people never allow space. They rush to explain themselves before anyone even misunderstands them. They rush to fix emotional discomfort before it naturally resolves. They rush to regain attention the second they feel distance. But confidence often looks slower, more grounded, less desperate to control perception. And strangely, people trust that energy more, because emotional steadiness signals security. You can even see this in conversations. The person trying hardest to maintain the interaction usually loses emotional leverage first, not because caring is weakness, because fear changes behavior. And people react differently when they feel they are being emotionally managed. The truth is, many relationships lose intensity because one person slowly abandons their own emotional rhythm. They become too available, too reactive, too transparent all the time. And eventually, the relationship stops feeling dynamic. Not toxic, not dramatic, just emotionally flat. Because tension disappeared, mystery disappeared, individuality disappeared. Everything became immediate, guaranteed, expected. That is why personal focus matters so much. When your entire emotional state depends on another person's responses, your behavior naturally becomes unstable. But when your life remains emotionally full, outside the interaction, your energy changes. You stop obsessing over small shifts. You stop interpreting every silence as rejection. You stop trying to secure certainty from people constantly. And ironically, that is often when people begin leaning toward you again, because your energy feels freer, more relaxed, less consuming. People are drawn toward emotional freedom, not emotional captivity. And one of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming attention comes from effort alone. It does not. Attention comes from emotional impact, from contrast, from tension, from presence, from emotional authenticity. That is why someone calm can command more attention than someone performing constantly, because grounded energy feels rare, especially now. Most people are emotionally overstimulated. Constant notifications, constant reassurance, constant emotional broadcasting. So, when someone stops reacting automatically, it stands out immediately. Not because silence is magical, because emotional discipline is unusual, and emotional discipline creates weight. You begin feeling harder to emotionally control, harder to predict, harder to manipulate through attention withdrawal. And people respond differently to that. Some respect you more. Some become more curious. Some become uncomfortable because they no longer know how to control the dynamic. But almost everyone notices the shift. That is why changing your emotional patterns changes your relationships. Not because you become someone else. Because people finally experience your presence without constant emotional accessibility. And there is another layer most people miss. When you stop reacting instantly, you also start seeing people more clearly. You notice who only responds to emotional chasing, who disappears when attention is no longer guaranteed, who becomes more respectful when boundaries appear, who only valued your availability instead of your actual presence. Because slowing your reactions does not only change how others see you, it changes what you see about them. And sometimes that realization is uncomfortable. You realize certain people were attached to access, not connection, to reassurance, not understanding, to emotional predictability, not emotional depth. That is why emotional balance matters more than performance. You do not need to become colder. You do not need to become distant. You do not need to manipulate attention. You just need to stop abandoning yourself every time you fear losing someone. Because when your emotional state stays grounded, people feel the difference immediately. Your words become calmer, your reactions become slower, your presence becomes heavier. And suddenly, people who barely noticed your energy before begin watching you differently. Not because you chased attention harder, because you stopped giving your emotional center away so easily, and that shift changes everything. Subscribe for more psychology and relationship insights. Most people assume confidence is loud. But real emotional confidence is usually quiet. It does not rush to defend itself every time somebody misunderstands it. It does not panic when attention shifts temporarily. It does not collapse emotionally the moment another person becomes distant for a day, an hour, or even a moment. Instead, it stays centered, and that centered energy changes the emotional atmosphere around you immediately. People begin sensing that your mood is no longer controlled by their approval. Your reactions stop feeling automatic. Your presence stops feeling endlessly available. And suddenly, conversations carry more weight again. Your words feel more intentional. Your silence feels more noticeable. Even your attention feels more valuable because it is no longer being given away from anxiety. That is the shift many people notice but cannot fully explain. You become emotionally present without becoming emotionally dependent. And when that happens, people often start treating you differently without understanding why. They listen more carefully. They watch your behavior more closely. They become more aware of changes in your energy because your emotional state finally feels grounded instead of reactive. That is why emotional discipline is not about pretending not to care. It is about caring without losing yourself in the process. The moment you stop abandoning your emotional balance for temporary reassurance, your entire presence changes. And people feel that change before you even say a word. And once you experience that shift personally, you start recognizing how often modern relationships are driven by emotional overreaction instead of emotional awareness. Most people are not responding to what is actually happening. They are responding to imagined loss, imagined rejection, and imagined abandonment. That fear creates rushed behavior, but calm awareness creates clarity. And clarity changes the way you speak, the way you listen, and the way other people emotionally respond to your presence over time, naturally.